Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Bench with Judge Arnone. I'm Judge Arnone, and we have an excellent show, I believe, for you today. We're dealing with many issues that the court sees over the course of any given day or week or month. And today we're dealing with issues related to domestic violence. We have some very compelling shows and have had several, and I believe this is one that many people may not think about very often, but unfortunately we see a lot of domestic violence in the courts and issues related to other crimes where there are victims involved. And I'm so pleased today to have our special guest from the Center for Victims, Maddie Potter. And Maddie, I know, I've known for quite some time now. We have done a number of programs together for domestic violence. And Maddie also is an advocate who works in our courts. So I want to introduce Maddie as a representative, and if you'd like to say hello to the folks.
Hi, it's nice to see everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be on the show, Ron. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about the issues that do affect many people in so many different ways, directly and indirectly, and the issues of domestic violence. And I think one of the things I'd like to start off with, Maddie, is if you could kind of just give our audience an idea of what the Center for Victims does and sort of what you're about, and then we can maybe get into a little conversation.
Sure. Well, the Center for Victims is a comprehensive agency in Allegheny County, and we cover violent crimes for victims of any type of violent crime. That includes any type of domestic violence-related crime, assault crimes, robberies, burglaries. We also cover homicides and attempted homicides. We'll do child abuse cases as well. So we see a lot of different cases, and we have advocates that are specialized to help victims with those types of cases when they're going through the court process and they don't understand everything that's going on. So
that's excellent. So you're really dealing with a vast group of people, and just everyone from young and old and in between, and it's such a, I think the Center for Victims is such a good organization because it's helping people that are in a tough time in their lives, who've been victimized, and that support, I think, from your organization is excellent. And can you tell us a little bit about the Center for Victims is a nonprofit organization, correct?
It is a nonprofit. Yeah, we are grant funded mainly, and we also are funded through donations from supporters, which is wonderful. And we have a lot of really great people that have been helping our agency, promoting our cause, really working well with us. We do a lot of fundraising and just have a great outreach team in our agency. But we have therapists, so every program that we have is free to our victims. We have therapists that work with trauma for children and adults of any types of crimes. We have a jail release notification program for victims to be notified when their offenders being released from jail. Victims compensation programs where we can help victims be compensated for out-of-pocket medical expenses or lost wages, travel expenses. It really is a great agency to work for and work with because everybody is helping each other just try to get somebody to be back to their normal self again.
Yeah, and that is, it's excellent because, again, being that it is a nonprofit and has really so many good networks to build upon and so many good people within the organization, and the fact that this is something that's not paid by the taxpayers as much as it is some grants and such, but the idea that it's such a good working organization, a functional organization that's helpful to the general public, and I applaud Center for Victims.
Thank you very much.
Really, and the work that you guys do. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, one of the main thrusts when you think of domestic violence.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about domestic violence and the wheel, I think, that you guys refer to, and things we can do and things we can look out for individuals maybe that are being victimized. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and I'd like to preface it by saying that domestic violence is one of those crimes that can affect any person in any situation. We see it in higher socioeconomic status areas, low income areas. It spans races, religions, ethnicities. It's a pervasive problem in our nation and worldwide. We do talk about the cycle of abuse, and what that is it might take a victim several times to leave a domestic violence relationship. It's not like a typical assault crime where it's a stranger that's done this to you or an acquaintance. This is somebody that you have shared a lot of your life with, and that is a hard thing for victims to understand, that it's not a normal process for them to be going through on a daily basis. So in general, it takes around 6 times for a victim to leave a domestic violence situation. And that does cause a lot of strain on the criminal justice system, I know, and there's some moments of frustration for the criminal court, for the police departments who have seen these people over and over maybe, and don't understand why they're not leaving. And our role as advocates is to work with the victims of these crimes to explain to them there are programs out there and this is not something that they have to live with on a daily basis. And then to also educate, we educate and empower the victim, and then we also try to educate the officers and the criminal system to explain it's not that they're trying to that it's a difficult process, and they're not trying to make it a difficult process for themselves, but they're just trying to figure out the best way to go through their lives to find a safe place.
And that's a good point. And I know, in working with you and working in the programs that we've done in Bethel Park and Upper St. Clair, that you've even educated me in a lot of different ways with regard to how some of these social issues are dealt with, particularly in domestic violence situations. And certainly realizing, and I think I've heard you say this before, Maddie, that you're not telling the people what to do, you're just sort of giving them a guideline. In other words, giving them maybe some of the answers they might be looking for, giving them some perspective, and certainly not necessarily advising or telling them what to do, but helping them along the way. Right.
We provide options counseling to any victim and safety planning, and that's the true role that we have with our victims and clients, is giving them the options and not forcing them into a situation or a decision that is out of their control. Domestic violence is all about power and control for the offender, and we don't want to replace the offender as their new person of control. So we make sure that the victim is the one, we say, driving the bus, so to speak. So where are they going to turn? What direction are they taking? We're just kind of providing roadmaps for them.
That's excellent. I knew that once we opened into that, you would go into the idea of how well you articulate that aspect of things. And certainly that's important, because these people are at a time in their lives where they need to know that they do have some control, and certainly should have control over their lives and the decisions that they make.
Definitely.
And so I will tell you, as a judge, not only do I see domestic violence and obviously many victims in my courtroom on a daily basis, but as magisterial district judges, we sit down in arraignment court and night court. We were on call for homicides. I just a few weeks ago did 4 homicides in one day downtown, and presided over that. So we see a lot of different things, but related to domestic violence in particular, this was probably about 4 or 5 months ago. I was down in arraignment court. And people might be surprised to hear that I heard 14 PFA, protection from abuse, motions, or the individuals who wanted to file PFA against another person for matters of abuse. That's 14 just in one day, which, by the way, is significant. That's higher than people are thinking. Oh, does that happen often? Well, I mean, I'd say the average down there on a night court routine would probably be somewhere in the order of 6, 7. So 14 is a little on the higher side.
Right.
And I bring that up because I do think it's important maybe for folks to know that, you know, protection from abuse orders are there for good reason. They're there to protect folks from violence, and they're to be filed for that basis, for protection from
Correct.
abuse, and not to abuse the orders, which sometimes
Right.
we see through, you know, family matters and situations like that, which is unfortunate. But maybe you want to talk a little bit about PFAs and protection
Sure.
from abuse orders and the documents. And I mean, I know, but I'd like, you know, you to tell the
Yeah,
public.
sure. There are three types of protection from abuse orders, and I think what you're referring to are the emergency protections, which would provide a 24-hour protection for a victim.
Or a weekend.
Or a
in
weekend,
fact.
correct. Yeah, it would, anytime that the court is closed, the business hours of the court do kind of change very, you know, suddenly, or if there's a long weekend
That's right.
where we had the
Holiday.
4th of July and
Yep.
July 3rd, courts were closed, so we
Yes.
did see a big influx on July 5th or 6th when we came back to court. What we do is we have a 24-hour hotline where we work with those victims who are going down to get those emergency PFAs. We try to safety plan with them and offer some other options, because sometimes people think the emergency PFA is the be-all to end-all, when we know as advocates and people in the criminal justice system, they're not always the perfect fit for every person. So in terms of emergency PFAs, we always have the 24-hour on-call support through hotlines throughout Allegheny County to talk to an advocate. In terms of business hours, we do have advocates that go to the PFA office and family division, and those office hours are, I think, 8:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. you can file, or 1 to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And there are family division judges that oversee those PFA proceedings, and we have advocates that kind of walk the victim through the process of what they're looking for, what they're asking the court, what the petition means. There's a little bit of custody that you can put in there if there are children that are shared together, which is really great in terms of trying to get a better basis. And a lot of people don't file for divorces or PFAs or leave an abuser because there are children involved. So that's a huge way that people control a domestic violence situation. So knowing that there is that custody part of the PFA has helped a lot of people, I think. From 7 to 10 business days after you get your final or your petition for your temporary PFA, you go back for a final PFA. So it's a 2-step process, which can be a little daunting, but there are free attorneys through Neighborhood Legal Services that can offer support for the plaintiffs as well. So they try their best to make it so it's not a monetary issue that if people aren't getting PFAs, which is really great, I think.
I agree, and certainly, again, the key thrust here is that looking for the well-being of the the person that's being abused and their children, if there are children involved, because unfortunately, as we talk a lot about, and we will in a moment, about, you know, all the indirect abuses or psychological matters that occur with this cycle.
Right.
But one thing I did want to talk about before, I don't want to be remiss on something you mentioned earlier, and it's so important, and that is the safety planning aspect and the safety net that's provided to victims or those, you know, of domestic abuse, because really that's such an important component to, you know, getting out of an abusive situation, because as we far too see on the news and in the paper and all the different mediums that, you know, sometimes the worst of all things happen where, you know, somebody is either commit suicide or kills someone in these types of situations. So the safety planning and being prepared to leave that abusive situation is so important. Can we talk a little bit about that?
And that's what we always explain to victims as well when we're down at the PFA office, is the PFA is a wonderful tool if it is used, you know, if it works for you. But it's a piece of paper as well. So if there's a controlling situation, if the abuser is going to, if a victim were to tell me he's going to get mad when he gets served with this, that's always nerve-wracking for an advocate to hear that as well. We always say, the plaintiffs in these matters know the defendant more than we do, so they know what they're capable of.
That's right.
So we always ask, what are your concerns? Do you have somewhere safe to go? Can you go home? A PFA would evict the abuser from your home, but is home safe to go to? So we do have free shelter services available. There are 3 agencies in Allegheny County with shelters on site of their companies, but there are 4 domestic violence agencies in Allegheny County. So maybe somebody living in Bethel Park, for example, might not feel comfortable going to the city of Pittsburgh for a shelter if his family knows people in that area. So we would work with other agencies. We would give you numbers to call other places to get a shelter that's maybe in a better space.
Might be in another county.
It could be in another county. Yeah, we've relocated people outside of the country, actually.
That is so important with regard to that whole safety net planning and having some opportunity to get away from that situation and really get everybody help.
Exactly. And we do it with children too. We offer safety planning for mothers or fathers coming in with their children. How do you explain that mom or dad isn't coming home, or that something's happened and they have to let mom or dad know when the other person is in the area? So we encourage them to use code words with their children. So say dad tries to pick them up off the bus stop, but he's not supposed to be getting them. Calling mom and saying, "Mom, can we order pizza tonight?" And that being the code word, so mom knows I have to call the police because he's trying to get my kid off the bus, or whatever it is. So things that we take for granted on a regular basis.
And you brought something up, that is important, and I think the viewers would need to know. I mean, most times it is, unfortunately, women that are the victims or the ones that are abused, but there are men that are in abusive situations, whether they be mentally or physically.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about that, about the other? I mean, because when we opened up, and you talked about all races and demographics, but this is a gender issue too that could go either way. Correct.
Correct. And there's men can be just as easily the victim as a woman can be. It might not be the typical type of abuse we see as domestic violence, where we often think domestic violence means physical abuse. But men can be the victims of mental abuse, psychological, financial. They can be the victim of physical even. It's not as often that we see it as the initial form of abuse, just by stature, women usually are smaller. So it's a little bit, there are different ways that men are abused, but definitely happens. We have many male victims, female victims. It's definitely, like I said, it's pervasive, and there is no gender.
Right. And so, we were talking about, and it's a good kind of inroad into the idea of the indirect, you're talking about the kids, you're talking about other family members, you're talking about, so that this abuse and this cycle occurs and it affects so many people, and whether it be the abusers or the victims, often people don't realize that circle is so broad with regard to all the people that it's affecting, somebody's mom, somebody's grandparents, somebody's, there's elder abuse too, of course, and that's a whole other, issue, but it's a very, very important one. But specifically, again, dealing with kids, unfortunately, that cycle, when they're in that abusive situation, it then carries maybe to the next generation.
Definitely.
It causes issues for those kids in school. It causes so many. So let's talk maybe briefly a little bit about, that, again, that indirect, and also drug abuse and alcohol are such a big player in these types of situations where you have abuse and you have these things going on. So there's a lot going on.
There are a lot of players in it, and it does kind of form a little bit of a tangled web for anybody who ends up getting stuck in it. Children often see it at home if they are the victim of if their mother or father is the victim of domestic violence, and they might carry it over to school, or it's so prevalent in their life through their whole childhood that they see it as a normal occurrence. And could just keep repeating this cycle where either they become victims or they become abusers because it's what they've known and what they've seen. It's it's a learned behavior, unfortunately, and through the court process, they try to work with offenders, working with the behavioral changes, with the anger management programs and things that we see oftentimes in court.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, we work with victims trying to explain their victimization and through therapy appointments and counseling sessions so that they're noticing some red flags early on in their relationships, maybe in the future, that could help them understand, is this a healthy, is this a safe relationship for me to be in?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Maddie, that with regard to the victims and or the abusers, that how important counseling and therapy and anger management programs and certainly if it's drug or alcohol related programs related to getting help with that problem that you might be afflicted with. But I'm such a big advocate, and I think you are too, of counseling and of talking about the issues, working them out. I mean, oftentimes those that are the abusers or those that have these issues, maybe because they were abused as a child or they were in a family of abuse,
Right.
They need help. And sometimes
You're right.
I think you've seen situations where the person gets help and actually can grow from it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely instances that I can recall where the court-ordered programs have helped a family or helped a victim through going to court and having the offender take classes or come to terms and work on their drug or alcohol-related issues or mental health-related issues. Other times it doesn't work. I think we can both agree with that too.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that need for control is just so overpowering of need to change.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we see that, and oftentimes that can be very detrimental for both the victim and offender. I think a lot of times we could agree that those are when homicides could happen, when extreme assault cases. It's very unfortunate. And just to put a stat out there, usually for domestic violence victims, the most lethal point of their whole domestic violence relationship is when they leave.
Sure.
Because at that point, the offender has felt like they have lost all control. And the only thing they can do is up the ante.
Yep.
And how much farther can you take it?
That's scary, and that's why we raise the awareness of the safety net and of the pre-planning, because just that stat that you just said, at that point, at that juncture, when they're talking about wanting to leave and that person feels they're losing that control, that's why it's so important to safety plan and make sure that you have a good exit strategy, so to speak.
Right.
When people do file the PFAs, that, if they violate them, because the person that is the abuser is served with the paper, to our viewers, so that they know that, they can't make any contact, they can't text, they can't call, they can't physically see the person, or maybe the kids, because the order could include that. And if they do, they'll immediately be arrested and taken to jail. So that maybe people were wondering out there, well, what happens once the paper's served or well, what happens is, and I've seen the orders where there's a violation, and then it becomes an I violation, where they're violating
direct criminal contempt,
and then all of a sudden the people are going to jail.
Right. Yeah. So that is a really great backup plan, or not. I don't want to say backup plan, but a repercussion for violating the PFA. Yeah. And we work with the safety planning at the PFA office with the victim and their individualized safety plan. So it's not like a cookie cutter thing where every person that comes in is getting the same information. Every case is different. Every family is different. So we make sure that every safety plan is catered toward what that family needs. And I know that jumping back onto the criminal justice system part of this, when I was saying about officers, attorneys, people getting frustrated with victims not wanting to go forward or prosecute, having the conversation with the advocate is a very integral part. Even if they're not going to go forward this time, next time they'll remember they had this conversation, and next time they might call us sooner, and next time they might ask for their own safety plan instead of us giving it to them. So it's very, as small of a step as it is for a victim, and even if they're saying, I don't want to do anything today, it's putting a seed in their head for later on down the road. So that's what's really important. In Maryland, they have a new program. It's been going on for about 10 years now, not so new, but we're trying to implement it in Pennsylvania, called the Lethality Assessment Program. And we have a couple police departments that have signed on for it. There's a statistic that only 4% of domestic violence related homicides victims of them ever sought services, knew about services for domestic violence.
Yeah.
This program is geared to educate more people sooner on in their victimization so that number goes down.
That's a great point. We only have a few minutes left, and I did want to briefly talk about the fact that I signed a pledge along with a number of other individuals, and it's a pledge that the Center for Victims had, and to help people that have been abused, and to say that no, we would never abuse or be an abuser, and that we would make people aware of abuse.
Correct.
And so,
and you've done such a great job by even hosting this today. That's been integral. So thank you.
And I want to say you've done a great job in this show, and in your outreach and your professionalism for the Center for Victims, and you've been such a great advocate not only to the courts and to the people that need your help, but it's been such a pleasure, working with you.
Thank you.
Let's in this kind of wrap up, let's talk about what maybe some contact information or phone numbers.
Sure.
I know you have a hotline.
We do have a hotline. If I could just borrow this, I'll just hold it up. But we're from the Center for Victims, and our hotline number is the 866-644-2882 number. It's a 24-hour hotline where you will get an advocate on the phone at any time, day or night, weekends. There's always somebody. There's no automated system that you have to press through. You're always going to get somebody on the phone. We do crisis counseling. We work with any type of, like I said, abuse, assault, people calling about child abuse, sex assaults. We have advocates that go out to the hospitals at night if there is a sexual assault that has happened. We can work through that, explain to you what to expect at the hospital, what to expect through court. We do follow-up calls with any victims to make sure that they're well aware of what's going on, and just keep them in constant contact with somebody, and just make sure that they're doing okay, touching base when we can.
Yeah, and it's not just the domestic abuse, but there's a number of crimes,
Correct.
Whether it be a homicide or burglaries or whatever. So this might be helpful. Also, there's a lot of different information that the courts can provide, a lot of information that we can be of help in the district, magisterial district judges' offices throughout Allegheny County. I want to thank our great guest today, Maddie Potter, from the Center for Victims, for really just a inspirational advocacy that you perform on a daily basis for people. And I know that you're very genuine about what you do, and you care about what you do. So folks, we got to wrap it up now. This is another edition of Beyond the Bench. I hope you enjoyed this show, and we'll be back for another edition of Beyond the Bench here very soon with another important subject matter as it relates to the courts, as it relates to you. Be safe and be a leader, not a follower. Thank you. Have a nice day.